You're listening to eLearnChat, where talk is knowledge.
Hello and welcome to eLearnChat, our new podcast featuring prominent leaders, shakers and movers in the e-learning and training industry. Your co-hosts are Rick Zanotti and Terrence Wing. This show is brought to you by Relate Corporation at www.relate.com and by Liquid Learn at www.liquidlearn.com. Hi, everyone. I'm Rick Zanotti, and this is our 14th episode of eLearnChat. Glad you could all join us, and wherever you are, we hope you're having a good day. Anyway, today we have our co-host, and I have some nice co-host music for him.
I'm waiting to hear it now. Okay, that sounds good. I like that.
And here is Terrence Wing. Hey, Terrence, how's it going?
It's going incredible, especially with such an awesome guest that we have. But as always, I'll take this time to go over our administrative stuff. And that is for anybody who is in firewall hell, we've got a couple of opportunities for you to see the show. If you can't get through to the main broadcast on justin.tv/RelateCorp, then you can always watch the show live through the Facebook fan page, through the ISD 2.0 Facebook fan page. And on liquidlearn.com, there's also a live stream going through there. So at least there's a couple of simulcast options for you to catch the show. Hopefully one of those gets you around your firewalls. And also, if you are joining us live, please feel free to chat with us and our amazing guest in the chat window on Justin TV, or you can use Twitter, and that will be the hashtag eLearnChat. So that is all I have, Rick. So I'll pass it on to you to introduce our guests.
Well, good. And today we have the pleasure of having with us Koreen Olbrish from Tandem Learning. Hi, Koreen. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Rick, and thanks, Terrence.
You're welcome.
Good of you to join us. And you do some really cool stuff from what I've been hearing. Augmented reality and augmented reality-based learning or games for learning, right?
We do augmented reality applications and alternate reality applications, which are sometimes confused for each other, but are related but separate types of things. So yeah, we actually do. We try to do all the fun projects with the new technology.
So now, what do you use as far as what kind of technologies are you using?
We do everything from very I would say lower tech, although some people might not think that it's lower tech, but lower tech solutions like QR code scanners, and I'm talking right now about the augmented reality technologies, all the way up to talking to companies like Qualcomm about their augmented reality chips that they're using in Android phones, and thinking about applications of 3D immersive augmented environments for learning.
That's cool. So they're actually putting augmented reality, they're building it into the chips.
They are, yeah. Right now, Qualcomm has their chips in Android phones. So there's a great demo that they did of just what the technology can do. They showed it at E3 last year. And Qualcomm partnered with Mattel and created a demo of an augmented reality Rock'em Sock'em robot game.
Cool.
And if anyone has a chance to go, I think the clip's available on YouTube. But I had a chance to meet with them to talk about how augmented reality can be used for learning, and got a live demonstration of it. And the really cool parts, which you might not get from watching the demo video, is that for learning purposes, the augmented reality application Rock'em Sock'em Robots is multiplayer because two people are playing against each other. It creates a completely 3D immersive learning environment because you're playing one of the robots in either a boxing ring or within a junkyard. Your robot is touch controlled on the Android phone screen. You can get a completely 3D viewpoint perspective within the environment, and your robot can actually manipulate objects within the environment. So very much like virtual world technology, which we have been working in for the past few years, augmented reality is moving in that direction, and being able to create completely 3D immersive environments, but through your phone.
That's
so
actually
very,
pretty cool.
very cool things on the horizon.
You know, you're looking here at my iPhone. Say goodbye to it because I'm going Droid. I've had it.
I will tell you, it was actually a very interesting demo because I myself am a bit of a Apple fan, and I had my iPhone, as did all of my coworkers and my business partner, and they brought the Androids with them for us to play the demo. And afterwards I was like, I may need a second phone. So.
I'm liking the Android a lot. Some of the people at work have them. My wife has one. They're really nice phones, and they work well. And frankly, they're innovating a little bit more than Apple, I think, right now, because they have to. They're catching up, and there's a lot of Androids out there, and they're doing a good job.
I think what will be interesting to see is, right now, augmented reality is still very much in the early phases, and it's still tied to location. So the one drawback or the one limitation of augmented reality for right now is that you need a tag or a target to point the phone at in order to communicate information. So even this very cool 3D immersive Rock'em Sock'em Robot game, in order to play, you had to point the phone at a mat that had the target on it that would bring up the world.
Oh, interesting. So you're pointing at something different. Okay, so both points.
So it's very location tied. My prediction is that within a few years, and I read something actually earlier today that some augmented reality apps are tying their targets to money, which I think is very interesting, because they assume that everyone has a dollar bill, and so that they can launch basically from anywhere, and it doesn't have to be geolocated or location specific. But regardless, what I think will emerge trend-wise is that augmented reality won't necessarily have to be tied to a target or location, that a lot of those experiences may launch from a particular location, but especially in learning applications and games, you think about, you don't want to necessarily have to be standing in one place to play a game, and you don't necessarily want to have to be tied to a specific geographical location to be able to play it. So if I launch a game in Philadelphia, but I fly out to San Francisco, I might want to still play the same game, and they will get around the location-specific pieces of that, and the targets are changing, and what can be targets are changing. So the technology is advancing, and I think especially for learning professionals, it will be interesting to see. I think there will be pressure. We were talking about iPhones. I think there will be pressure on all of the phone manufacturers to start looking at the chips and the technology available within their phones to launch those types of applications.
That's actually pretty exciting. That'll be fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to have watched, my roots over the last few years have been in virtual worlds, and now seeing basically virtual worlds being launched from phones is a really, really interesting development, and can't wait to see where that goes. So
good.
Koreen, so that our viewers know exactly what the premise is probably not the best words, but could you give us an example, and you can even use your Dr. Strangelove if you want to, of one of the augmented reality games that you've created, and just kind of walk us through that creation process as well as the learner experience?
Sure. So first I'm going to do a little definition, and that's the difference between augmented reality and alternate reality. So one of the problems with what I do is that I develop programs with both augmented reality, which is creating a layer of reality over real things. So I always use I've been reprimanded for using this example, but I think it's the best and most logical example of augmented reality is if you watch football, the first down line that's on screen, when you're watching it on television, obviously you know that line isn't there in real life. But
it's not.
I think a lot of people don't realize that.
As your marker of when the team's got the first down. So that layer of information over real life is augmented reality. You're basically adding information to a real environment. Alternate reality is creating an alternate storyline or kind of a fictional story that's happening that you can do things in real life to play along. So it's basically creating an alternate storyline of things that are happening, and the gameplay happens in real life. So where the intersection of the two, and I actually spoke on a panel at a games conference last fall. What's interesting is the two are converging. That the alternate reality games are now starting to use augmented reality, and it's all AR and ARG, and all the letters get all muddled up. So it's just I just wanted to kind of give that definition as setting a stage. So the ARGs that we've been creating up to this point, most of them have been in the alternate reality side in creating storylines that engage people in gameplay and focus on learning. So you mentioned the Dr. Strangelove game that we created for DevLearn. That the premise of that and the goal was that a bunch of people who are interested in learning technologies were going to the DevLearn conference last fall, and one of the takeaways or main focuses of learning at that conference is learning about new technologies and how they can be used for learning. So as we were thinking about creating a game, we thought what might be helpful is to help equip people who are at the conference as they're leaving with all of these new ideas and all this information from all the presentations. Once they get back to work, what are the obstacles that they're going to face from all of their peers that weren't at the conference and didn't hear all of these things, and or maybe aren't bought into leveraging new learning technologies. So we created a game that was focused around Dr. Strangelove, who was a mad scientist, and we brought in learning experts, learning technology experts in the industry to play the roles of other scientists that were all a part of the game. And each of the scientists focused on a particular organizational objection to new learning technologies. And through the course of the game, players looked for clues that all related to content that would help them overcome organizational objections. So those clues were disseminated through all kinds of social media channels. We used Twitter a lot. We had Facebook pages. We had Twitter accounts for each of the characters in the game. We used YouTube videos. We used Flickr photos. And we tried to get people to, we created community sites within, we have an alternate reality game portal called the Looking Glass Engine that was used as the basis. And within that engine, we held live chat with the learning experts, and we allowed the players to create teams and groups and play against each other. So that was the basic premise, that they were all collecting these clues and points to overcome organizational objections to learning technologies. And then when we were on site, we had additional clues embedded in presentations. We had a information station where people could come and learn more about alternate reality game design. And we talked to lots and lots of people and tried to explain what we were doing, but mostly we tried to get people to sign up so they could experience it themselves. And so that was the basic premise. And the Dr. Strangelove game that we designed was the sixth alternate reality game we had designed within a year. So that was one of our larger games that we had created, and it was certainly, I think, for us, the culmination of a lot of learning experiences over the last year, and how to design an alternate reality for learning.
Koreen, what are you developing these games in?
I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking.
It's a talk show. That's a good thing.
Yeah. What are you developing? What are you developing these games in? What kind of tools are you using?
Well, we had started out trying to use social networking sites and portals. And what we found was that we really wanted to create a back-end engine that could handle all the scoring and team dynamics and leaderboards and gameplay and social networking components. Because one of the things that we did early on with our games was we leveraged a lot of the social media tools, especially Twitter and Facebook. Primarily, we used a lot. But within organizations, and I'm sure you hear this a lot, people very often have at least Facebook blocked, if not also Twitter. And it was difficult for some people to play or think about how they could use a game like this in their organization outside of those social networking sites. So we built the Looking Glass engine as our game mechanics backend, but also with the functionality to house the social networking and the team building components that were important as far as the communication and the flow of gameplay. Because a lot of the value in creating these games are actually getting people to work together, the networking components, and getting people to share information both within their team and then across all the players of the game is really one of the essential elements. So we wanted to make sure that organizations that had issues with firewalls and blocking those types of sites still could utilize that functionality. So we built it kind of within our game engine so it could be housed in the back end.
Sounds good. Terrence, any activity in the chat room? Any questions for Koreen?
Yep, actually, we'll kind of scroll back through some other questions that you answered some of them in your previous response. But Wiseblad is asking, and forgive me if I butcher anybody's name, but he or she is asking, is AR expensive to produce? And kind of a second part to that is, have you ever incorporated QR codes into augmented reality?
Yep. So the first kind of answer to the expense part is it depends on what you're doing. QR codes are very cheap, if not free. Because there are free QR code generators online, as well as almost every smartphone has free QR code readers that you can load onto your phone. So we did design a game last year. I mentioned the games conference that I spoke at in Atlanta with Siege. And I worked with Deborah Thomas at Silly Monkey, who's located there. And we created a game that people who were attending the conference could play. It was primarily played through QR codes. We also had some 3D clues that you needed 3D glasses to read. We tried to play with a bunch of different technologies and ways for people to get clues and information. So that was fun.
Koreen, let me interrupt you for a second. For those
Sure.
who don't know, can you define what a QR code is?
Sure. So, oh, geez. I'm trying to think. I don't know if you have any images of one. That might be good to show. But it's basically a black and white. It looks a little bit like a barcode, only not so bar-ish. It's more it's patterned through blocks and black and white codes, and QR code readers, and they're becoming much more prevalent.
Well, the phones have them too, right? A lot of the phones have those built in.
Yes, a lot of them do, or you can download QR code reader apps for free.
Mm-hmm.
And very, very easy to get your hands on. I keep going places. It's funny, now that I use them for games, everywhere I go I notice where QR codes are. And I take my kids to Chick-fil-A every Tuesday night for chicken nugget night. It's tonight. And Chick-fil-A uses QR codes on all of their in-restaurant all of their materials. So if you're sitting at a table and they have something up that they want you to read, a QR code embedded on all of their advertising materials, even within the restaurant, to launch more information about what it is that they're promoting.
That's very clever.
And a lot of people probably aren't noticing them yet, but once you start looking for them, you'll see them everywhere.
Yeah.
And more people are using QR codes as a really quick way to communicate lots of information directly into your phone. So instead of giving a website, they might just have a QR code that you can quickly scan and it'll send you to a website. But for other QR codes, like within the game, the QR codes actually would scan automatically into the game and score points for you. So anytime you found when we ran the QR code game at Siege, when you scanned the clue in, it would log your for you. So it was a bit like a scavenger hunt. And I know Gina, who spoke this morning, actually ran a scavenger hunt game using QR codes at DevLearn while we were running Dr. Strange-Learn. So it's definitely a low cost and very fun way to get people engaged in doing actual tasks and being able to create a game out of it using those codes. But then some of the augmented reality is very expensive. So I mean, there's a very wide range. I mean, if to develop something like the Rock'em Sock'em Robot game, obviously is much more detailed and technology intensive than doing something with QR codes, which can be done very quickly and easily.
By the way, how was the performance on that Rock'em Sock'em Robot game? Was it pretty fast?
I'm sorry?
Well, how was the performance on that? Was it pretty fast? On the Rock'em Sock'em Robot game?
On the QR codes?
No, on the game.
Rock'em Sock'em, it was real time. It was fantastic. Yeah, no, it was, and I joke because I'm not competitive at all, but I played 3 rounds of Rock'em Sock'em Robots against Jed, who I hope is watching right now, and I beat him every time. So it was.
So you just don't think you're competitive?
I'm not. No, I'm not competitive at all. But it was basically real time. I mean, he and I were standing, pointing the phones at a target, which was this mat. And our robots were facing each other and fighting, and we had 3 different moves that we could block, and we could punch. I don't remember what the other one was. I think we could punch high and we could punch low, and that was all touch controlled on the phone. So very, very interesting from a girl who kind of cut her teeth in virtual worlds years ago in Second Life, and having the very complex controls initially of figuring out how to navigate in a virtual world, and going to a phone where you're basically controlling a 3D robot avatar in an environment by just some touch controls on a phone screen. Huge leaps and bounds, even in a matter of a few years. So.
Now, I participated in your Zombie Apocalypse, and I participated in your Doctor Strange-Learn
Yes.
augmented reality game. Both great, but I saw an evolution, I guess, in Doctor Strange-Learn, where you started to use more technology. You started to engage the learners more. So the dynamic was a lot different. And I was wondering what lessons did you learn? And I guess that was maybe a 1 or 2 year time span between the two. So what lessons did you learn over that time period in developing these games?
Yeah, so the very first ARG that we designed was for DevLearn 2009. And that was our Zombie Apocalypse game.
Oh, you know what? I think
which I affectionately refer to as our grand experiment. And I know you had Brent Schlenker on a couple weeks ago. But it was in large part because Brent gave us the green light. I had called him early in 2009 and said, we're investigating alternate reality games, and no one's really done anything yet related to learning. So we want to design one, and we want to launch it at DevLearn. And he said, great, that sounds fantastic. So go ahead. So we knew, at Tandem, we design games. So we know about game dynamics, but we weren't quite sure how that would look in an alternate reality game. We weren't sure. Back in 2009, people weren't as prolific in using Twitter and a lot of the social media sites as they are now. Even within a year, we saw tremendous change in the technology landscape and what people were comfortable with using. And so we made some guesses and we made some assumptions, and we actually thought that there'd probably be about 10 people playing, and it would be us and like 5 people we knew. So we really didn't think that as many people would play as they did. But by the time we got to DevLearn, we had over 200 people playing.
That's pretty cool.
The first year. And what we learned out of that, we learned a lot of things, actually. We learned a little bit about the group dynamics of how people were competing both with their own teammates and across teams. We learned a lot about people's desire to connect and network with the people that they were teammates with. And a lot of people, because we hadn't provided means for them to communicate, they had created their own team Facebook pages and their own networking sites so they could speak privately without the other teams knowing what they were doing.
which we thought was very interesting. And so we built that in over the year. And we learned just a lot about how people interacted with content, what their patterns were, some of the limitations to access, depending on what your job is like. We made the first game mobile enabled, but not probably to the extent that we needed to. And that was one of the priorities over the next year. So between the Zombie Apocalypse and Dr. Strangelern, we did 4 more alternate reality games, some for conferences, some were for corporate events. And every one, we had major lessons learned. And I would say just in general, one of the real challenges for anybody who is looking to create an alternate reality game for learning and launch it within an organization for learning purposes is that you can't underestimate the marketing of the game. One of the earmarks, or one of the key characteristics of alternate reality games in the entertainment world is that they're very subversive and secret, and the whole allure of them has been people going around trying to find secret clues. For learning and for our audiences, you don't want it to be so secret. You really want them to know that there's a game going on. You want them to know what the clues look like so that if they see one, they can identify it. And you really want there to be a lot of information about the game. There was one particular event that we ran that the event organizers decided that they wanted to really keep the game kind of secret, and they thought participants would just be motivated if they heard a little bit about it. And we had the lowest participation in that event of any game we've ran.
It was secret.
Because they just, nobody knew, they didn't have enough time, they had other things going on, they didn't really know ahead of time. So, we definitely, that was a huge lesson learned. Like, if you want people to participate in a game that's, a serious game that's for learning, you need to be very transparent and do a lot of the marketing and advertising and get people interested in other ways besides it's secret society kind of feel. So
we have a question from Shift Guru, and he's asking, how would you pitch the value proposition of ARG, to a potential user?
So one of the challenges that we have in describing what an ARG is that it can really be designed for anything. Just as there are limitless number of games in game design, and people are still designing all kinds of different games to this day. We haven't run out of options for how people can play and interact with each other. It's very difficult to alternate reality games and their design are as varied and different as the types of subject matter that you might want to address. So the value really is, for me, in thinking about, would an organization benefit from creating an ARG? One of the value propositions is that ARGs get people interacting with each other and actively learning. Really, you don't want an ARG to be somebody sitting behind their desk and just playing on the computer. It's not a very good application of the game technology. One of the values of this game is that you can create puzzles and complex decision-making and test problem-solving skills in a way that most other learning experiences don't allow you to. You can also really push people to be working on communication skills, teamwork, and collaboration in ways that most other games don't force you to, because they're not necessarily multiplayer. I mean, I don't know, you guys, how many multiplayer learning experiences or training sessions you've gone to where your learning and the value you get out of it depends on your interaction with other classmates. But in my experience, it's pretty rare. And ARGs actually allow you to set up a dynamic that creates the necessity for people to work together and work on those types of skills that a lot of other training programs have a difficult time targeting. and really practicing. I mean, if your goal is to increase communication skills or to work on leadership development and put people into situations where they have to solve problems together, and they have to work together to find information and put the pieces together to solve issues. There's really, I haven't seen a better mechanism than alternate reality games.
I should tell you also that Jed is in the chat room, and Brent also from eLearning Guild is in the chat room, and they're supporting you. They're adding comments to everything that you're saying, dittoing a lot of things.
Good.
Jed says I should ask you the really tough questions though, so I'm not quite sure what that means.
Ask him what a tough question would be.
So Jed, you'll have to relay those questions to me, and I'll be sure to ask her. So with I think you had said you did 5 ARGs since that first one, since Zombie Apocalypse. What's the 6th one going to look like, since you've had 5 chances to perfect it, and you've gotten so much better each time? Well, at least the 2 I've played, they definitely, you can see the growth and the evolution that you took. So what does number 6 look like?
Yeah, after DevLearn, we kind of took a little bit of a hiatus, and right now I think the conversations that we're having around alternate reality games are much more focused on specific learning challenges. So I started talking about communication skills and leadership development, but some of the kind of basic organizational challenges that people face. If you think about corporate training, what does everyone have to go through that training-wise that doesn't go very well or isn't very engaging? One of the topics that a lot of people are approaching us about is new hire training. That they're constantly hiring people. They need to get people acclimated to the organization, and they want them to learn about the culture and the people and the operation of the company, and trying to think of new ways of doing that other than showing a quick video clip or having someone walk around and tour the building. So what are some engaging ways to do that? And I think one of the most interesting ARGs that we designed was for Constellation Academy of Wine. We designed an ARG for their sales training department. And so we were teaching sales reps more about their products and how to better relate to their customers. And I think those 2 applications, kind of looking at building sales skills and doing some orientation type ARGs, are probably where we're headed with a lot of the gameplay and the conversations we're having now. I mean, I think more and more organizations, there's been the huge gamification trend that everyone knows what Foursquare is, and well, most people do. And there's been a lot of talk about the gamification of health. We're talking to some organizations around creating health games and how to better manage or treat certain disease states using game mechanics and ARGs. And so those types of things are becoming more and more common. I think people are really looking at games as a way of addressing social issues. Jane McGonigal's book, Reality is Broken, certainly is helping that along as well. I saw her on Stephen Colbert and was so excited. So,
now,
and just there's a lot more awareness of games as a way of teaching and learning.
Now, I know you do a lot of work with pharmaceutical companies, and I know how protective they are of their firewalls and everything else you can possibly imagine. So when you're dealing with an organization, like a pharmaceutical company, how do you implement an augmented reality game in that kind of environment where it's almost forbidden to touch your cell phone or go outside the firewall or do anything that they feel might put them in jeopardy? So what's the pitch for that type of company, since a lot of our viewers are unfortunately existing in those environments?
Yeah, no, it's. I think the concerns that pharmaceutical companies have, pretty much every organization has. It's obviously the financial industry has security concerns. Government and the government clients that we've talked to have the same issues. And pharmaceutical companies, obviously, there's a lot of, and we've actually been working with some continuing medical education companies that do physician education, and they have the same. Everyone's kind of got the same nervousness around information. I think what has helped, well, I think there's two issues. One is just the devices, that there are IT concerns around data security. And we've been dealing with that for years and years, not because of IT, but because in the pharmaceutical industry, everything's so heavily regulated as far as messaging and not wanting to put people's health at risk. So that's a valid concern. And for years, they've had the multi-tiered medical, legal, and regulatory reviews of all content, which has always been a very interesting process to go through, and often stripped out a lot of the flavor and interestingness of e-learning in general, even before, we were talking about alternate reality games. So there's the content side, which is, how do we keep our data secure? And then there's the device side, which is what technologies do our people have available to them. So when we're looking at designing games, obviously we have to look at both. Is what we're designing, how can we design a game to be played and be accessible by the people who need to be playing it? And one of the interesting lessons learned when we designed the ARG for the Siege conference was it was a games conference. And the assumption was that, here are a bunch of people who are very technology savvy and gamers, and they're going to a games conference, and we're going to design a game for them, and we're going to use augmented reality. So they're going to be cutting edge. We got to the conference, and about 2/3 of the attendees of the conference didn't have smartphones, which was a bit of a shock. But if you think about the demographics, a lot of the people at the game conference were in their early 20s or just gotten out of college. They were looking for jobs, and they couldn't actually afford smartphones. So one of the lessons learned coming out of that design experience was that you really need to understand that and design for the technologies that the people who are playing your game will have accessible and available to them. The cool workaround at that conference was that people would team up with other people who did have smartphones. So there were bands of groups of people roaming around the conference playing the game together, but it was unintended consequence. So that wasn't designed into it. So for our corporate clients, we really do a technology analysis and look at, okay, what devices are people using on an everyday basis? Do they have access to certain sites? How can we enable the gameplay? And from the content side, I think you have to be very, very smart about what the subject matter is that you're dealing with, the storyline that you develop around that content, because most of these games are based around a storyline that you're playing through, and you're playing a character in this game, and making sure that if it's a serious topic or if it's an issue with very serious consequences attached to the learning objectives, that you're treating the subject matter appropriately in that context. So, if you're talking about a sales environment and you want the application of the skills and I'm thinking of the Constellation Academy of Wine game that we developed, we created customers that as closely reflected as we could the actual customers and environments that they would be facing when they went out to sell their products. And all of the situations that we created and the scenarios that came up during the game were all very realistic scenarios that sales reps would typically have to deal with. In pharmaceutical, though, one of the challenges for us or things to think about is, do you want to develop a game around a particular product? Or are you designing games around skills that are outside of a particular product promotion? So are you teaching people about better communication skills and communication with customers and those types of
of topic areas, or are you, very focused on a particular product? And your game design and how you create those dynamics will vary depending on what the subject matter is and the learning goals of the game.
Do you find that you have to, well, actually, I think this question might have been answered, but Justin was asking, do you need to have a cell phone in order for it to be classified as augmented reality?
I think so. I haven't seen, I mean, there are other devices that you can use, but I don't think they're widespread. I mean, obviously the government and military are using augmented reality glasses and other things that can do data overlays. But I would say, 99% of the AR augmented reality applications I've seen have been through phones.
Phones, yeah. Most of the ones I participated in, I think, as well. What model of instructional design? Well, I'm sorry, am I talking over you?
Mobile is really the leader in the augmented reality space.
I'm sorry, you cut out on that one. Who's the leader?
Delays.
Koreen, can you hear us?
The audio keeps delaying.
Okay. Who was the leader in the augmented reality realm?
Now I can. Yep.
Skype's not cooperating.
No, one of the problems with live TV is that we sometimes get these glitches.
We didn't hear who you said the leader was in augmented reality.
Well, we're getting her video feed, but we've lost your audio.
Koreen, can you hear us? No, I'm not sure she's hearing us. Koreen, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm hearing about every other word.
About every other word? Okay.
Oh, there, you're back.
Okay. Who did you say the leader was in augmented reality?
Oh, the mobile industry.
The mobile industry on the whole.
Yeah, I mean, right now, so the panel that I was on last fall, I was the only non-technical person. Despite my throwing around of all these crazy technologies, I'm actually not, I'm the design person, not the technology person. But I was on a panel with two gentlemen who were working at augmented reality labs. And the types of things that they were designing and building were all for your use through mobile technologies and specifically phones. And unfortunately, a lot of the demos that they were showing me were first-person shooter games, which are infinitely less interesting to me for learning than a lot of the other applications or things that we could do. But in the entertainment industry, which is where a lot of the technology advancement is driven through, first-person shooter games sell. So it was a little disconcerting to me that it was going to convert people's cell phones into these augmented reality guns that they were shooting targets with, but the technology capabilities and what they were working on as far as targeting and control and being able to focus images and the types of environments they were able to create, because they're kind of pushing for these games, are all technologies that we're going to be able to use for learning design purposes shortly after they're released for the entertainment industry. Most of the presentations that I give talking about the future of learning, I run around and I play most of all the new video games to see. My favorite is the Xbox Kinect right now, because it's amazing. You don't have anything, just you're the controller. So thinking about how technology is advancing, especially in augmented reality, right now it looks like mobile devices are going to be our kind of window or ticket into those learning experiences.
Koreen, a lot of the people watching this are instructional designers or people involved in e-learning. What would you recommend as a way to get educated in learning how to write for a virtual reality or for an augmented learning kind of game?
That's a great question.
What kind of training would you recommend that they get? aside from
Yeah.
playing games, which does teach to a certain point?
Yeah. So this is a really interesting question, and I think a really, really relevant one. So most instructional design programs do not focus on or do much with experiential learning or how to design for experiential learning. And when we really started focusing on leveraging new technologies for learning, we started going to all the games conferences. So GDC, Game Developers Conference, is going on this week. GDC Austin, which is more of the interactive conference in the fall. We spent a good year and a half going to all of those conferences and going to all of the sessions and learning about how game designers were designing experiences to engage players. And the goal of games, which is different from instructional design. So instructional design typically is designed for a person to play through or go through a module one time, hopefully get all the information they need, practice a few times, what they need, what they're supposed to be learning, and then take an assessment. And hopefully they show in the assessment that you learned what you're supposed to learn. Game design and game designers are designing experiences to get people to play over and over and over again for incremental improvements in skill, which is very different. And hard, I think, for some instructional designers to wrap their brains around the difference between designing for incremental improvement through repeated practice and wanting someone to go through an e-learning module and have mastered whatever the subject is after going through it. So I would recommend for people who are interested in more experiential design or designing for these immersive environments, there's two models. There's game design models, and game designers use a completely different tool set than instructional designers, and I think it's important to understand how they think about motivation and engagement in designing experiences. And then there's kind of the what I have often heard referred to as the apprenticeship model. When we think about experiential or immersive design, we think about from the beginning. If you had no limitations, no technology limitations, no resource limitations, no time limitations, and you wanted to teach something to someone, how would you design it? What would you have them do to learn it? And then how would they prove to you that they knew how to do whatever it is, or they knew the information? And think almost about it from, the apprenticeship model of, can you actually create an experience for people to practice the things that you want them to know how to do? We do a lot of virtual immersive learning environments. So we're working with an organization on creating a virtual oncology practice to allow oncologists and people who treat patients with cancer to help them keep up to date on the most recent cancer treatment guidelines. And instead of just presenting a bunch of data to them and having them recite it back, we're actually presenting information to them, and then they're expected to use it in relation to treating virtual patients. So we can really see whether or not they understand the guidelines. And I think that's a very different way of thinking about getting people to change their behaviors. And both of those types of experiential design, both from the repetitive incremental learning and also from the kind of immersive, actually practice what it is you need to do to show that you can actually do it, are very different design models than what's taught in a lot of the instructional design schools right now. So I don't know if that helps. I know there are organizations and universities that are starting to look at this, and some are doing better than others. But if you go and you talk to game designers, a lot of the things that we should be doing or thinking about as instructional designers, they have to do because that's how they make money.
Right.
They make money by getting people to play their games over and over. They have to get people engaged. No. They have to get people motivated.
And you're right. Most programs don't really talk anything at all about really game design or anything as far as instructional technology. They just kind of glean right over it. And as a result, we have a lot of one-dimensional learning, which just kind of goes in one direction and not exactly compelling. In fact, it's usually pretty mind-numbing. And that is an issue. And I keep telling some of the schools...
I kind of joke sometimes that I'm the counter...
Well, did we lose you?
I think we had a delay.
Oh, for a minute, yeah.
Well, this has actually been really a good conversation, and we're almost up on our hour, so we're going to have to actually end this. But this is fascinating because I think it is the realm of the beginning of where the whole industry is going to go, because you're just going to be teaching people differently in the future, and hopefully with a lot more success. So
there's some really interesting trends that will start to emerge, and this is, I don't want to give away the farm here as far as the direction that Tandem's thinking, but we've been working.
Oh, you can tell us. No, we won't tell anybody.
The educational, No, right? It's secret. But in looking at the educational technologies that are emerging, there's obviously there's two divergent paths. There's the rapid development tools and the technologies that people just want to hurry up and train people on some content, test them on it, prove that they went through it, and hopefully they learned it, and the training's been done, check the box. A lot of compliance training falls into that category, but not just compliance training. And then there are the trends of getting people to really practice and experience actual things, and that's where a lot of the technology is heading. Outside of learning technologies, just in general, technologies are becoming more immersive, more realistic, more engaged as far as yourself being in that space and really being active in the process of using the technology. And what I think will end up happening is, although a lot of learning technologies have been moving in the rapid development vein, that what people are using in their everyday lives will have to start being used for these learning experiences, and we'll see it starting out in schools where kids are playing in virtual worlds, they're using augmented reality, they are playing games to learn, and then they're going to go to school, and schools aren't teaching them that way, so there's already a pressure there, and so schools will have to adjust and look at how technology can be leveraged. And then as these students get into the workforce, they'll have been learning using all these very immersive experiential technologies their whole lives. And so organizations who are thinking about it now, for not only for recruitment purposes, but also just organizationally how to stay competitive to attract the best talent, that'll become a differentiator. And the organizations that are really just focused on learning and training as a hurry up and get it done will not be either attracting or retaining the types of people that organizations that are looking at development as an immersive experiential process will be getting. And technology is enabling those types of things. So it's exciting to watch how the trends are emerging and how organizations are starting to realize that. So
that's great. Well, Koreen, it has been a pleasure having you on, and thank everybody in the chat room for joining us today. And Terrence, any final comments?
Of course. Well, thank you, Koreen. It's awesome to hear you. And, we've known each other for a couple of years, so it's always good that I sort of had you to myself here almost for an hour. So that's always a good thing. But I did want to announce to our viewers that next week we have Cami Bean from Kineo on, and she'll be discussing instructional designs, and she's got a great followership as well. So, and you came close to breaking Brent's record, but not
Yes, I
quite.
heard from Cami earlier, who wished me luck because she knew she was coming next.
Yes, she is next. So she's in good company. So thanks so much, Koreen.
Thank
that
you
was
both.
great.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you. Well, you guys have a great day, and wherever you are, again, have a good time, and thank you for visiting us, and we'll see you next week. Thanks a lot, everyone.